The buildings and construction sector is by far the largest emitter of greenhouse gases, accounting for perhaps a staggering 37% of global emissions. The production and use of materials such as cement, steel, aluminium, they all have a significant carbon footprint, but it doesn't have to be this way. There are many solutions and clean innovations springing into life and being implemented in this huge sector, solutions that can reduce emissions dramatically. We will dig deeper into this with the following three guests, and I'd like to call them on stage, a bit like a game show. Can I have Riikka Paarma, the Chief Sustainability Officer of the Halton Group? Riikka, I think you're, yeah, it's perfect. It's like EasyJet, you know, free seating. So, then we've got Johan Mandaric Reunanen. Now, I haven't said that totally wrong, and you can clear that up right now. Reunanen. I really can't do
Reunanen.
that. Perfect, okay.
Thank you.
And you are the Climate Impact Director at Stegra, which was the company formerly known as H2 Green Steel.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. And finally, we've got Jane Walerud, who's Executive Chair and Investor at Grafmatech, which we heard about just before. Yeah, it was really interesting, really interesting. Good, all right. Riikka, very briefly, what is Halton Group and what do you do in the construction sector?
So, Halton Group is a indoor air quality and safety company. So we do HVAC solutions for demanding indoor environments.
Right.
And our major positive sustainability impact comes from being the energy efficient solutions for HVAC, which actually stands for 15% of global CO2 emissions. So a important sector in that way. And my role is to be the Chief Sustainability Officer in the company.
Okay, okay. I know that Halton's main raw material in the construction sector is steel, right? So what brings me to you, Johan, because this is where kind of you come in with your disruptive business. Can you explain what you're doing and perhaps a little bit about this relationship as well with Halton, yeah?
So, I mean, first of all, so Stegra, formerly known as H2 Green Steel, is currently building a green steel plant and actually a green iron and a green hydrogen plant up in Boden in northern Sweden. The purpose of Stegra is to decarbonize hard-to-abate industries, and we start with steel, simply because that is one of the dirtiest industries on the planet, standing for about 8% of the global emissions. Mm-hmm. So what we want to do is to show that it is possible to actually find a different way of producing steel, used in a lot of different applications all around the world, at an emissions intensity that is not, you know, like 2,500 kilos of CO2 per ton of steel, but rather less than, you know, 200-300 kilos of CO2 per ton.
Interesting. Okay. So just coming back on this a little bit, Johan, Stegra's way of producing steel is still an unusual alternative in the world in which we live, yeah? When do you think your model for making steel, which is fossil fuel free, yeah, I think, when do you think that could be the norm, and how fast can we get there?
I mean, so it all really builds on electrification, really. I mean, the first step of the process is hydrogen. So we want to produce green hydrogen from green electricity. And then instead of using blast furnaces, which requires a lot of coks and coal, we want to use the green hydrogen to reduce the iron ore to iron, and then use that iron into our EAF, which is an electric arc furnace, which also runs on electricity. So pretty much our main feedstock here is iron ore, a bit of scrap, and a lot of electricity. So it requires electricity
right.
as an alternative energy source,
yeah,
instead of the coal used today.
It requires a green ecosystem of people doing all kinds of different things in a sustainable way to make every part of it happen. Yeah. Okay. Now, Jane. So Graphmatech, which we also just heard of earlier, which was interesting. I was trying to get to the nub of this, right? How did graphene go from being hero to zero, and then how is it coming back again? And I don't think we understood that by the end. But it's developing this novel material for sustainable industrial use, and we understood it's basically a way of bringing conductivity to all kinds of other materials like plastics and
We
things.
replace metal.
You replace metal. Okay. Tell us a little bit more about it, and tell us what the blockers are.
What is?
Tell us a little bit more about it, and also what might block, or what might be some of the challenges to scaling this solution.
Okay, well, we'll start with Graphmatech, but actually I work with 3 companies, okay?
Okay.
So we'll go back and say, so one of them is air forestry. So we do forestry with drones. So we fly out with a drone, pick a tree to harvest, put a tool on it, it strips off all the branches, saws it off, and the drone flies back to the roadside with the tree. That gives you around 8%, 9% more forest growth in the same area, and a whole lot less diesel burned.
Okay.
Around half the energy use, and it should be at scale 4 times cheaper and more efficient than the current forestry. Okay, that's one. Another one's called Pebble. We take carbon dioxide and turn it into construction materials, which are extremely low carbon. We think we can make building into a carbon binding, carbon sequestering industry, and we believe strongly that we will be quite a bit cheaper than the current cement and concrete, because we use much less energy. Okay, those 2. And then Graphmatech, well, what we do is replace metal. Okay, so rather than having copper in a pipe, which is expensive, horrible for the environment to do it, and impossible to recycle, and it gets stolen, right? So make a regular pipe with a couple of stripes of graphene in, which is cheap, uses the same pipe manufacturing exactly as the other stuff, as the current one, and it doesn't get stolen, and it's recyclable.
Okay.
So it's cheaper and it's better. So all of our companies, those 3, are green transition, but they're also cheaper. There is no green premium. They're scalable, and they are good for the environment. Absolutely good for the environment.
Okay. Okay. And they all have a link in some shape or form to the construction industry as well, and other industries. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, getting wood. Wood is a really important renewable material. Forests, we want to be healthy and green and to have a lot of biodiversity. That's what that does. Okay, that's air forestry. Pebble, yeah, it's using carbon dioxide to make an industrial raw material, yeah, which is permanently sequestered. It's gone for thousands to millions of years out of the biosphere, and then making it into construction, yeah, then it's construction material. And Graphmatech is, there are probably too many things we do with it, but it really is about replacing metal, making conductive materials not out of metal.
Okay. Interesting. Riikka, a lot of companies say they need money for the green transition. We have an investor here, so that's also very good. But you seem to be less worried about this in terms of your business. Can you explain that?
Well, I suppose everyone is in some shape or form worried about money, but I would disagree with that statement. But for us, I think the main challenge, if we think about scaling our solutions, is really the way the value chain for built environment typically works, which means that it's a very long value chain with a lot of not necessarily aligned decision making, which means that not always does the sustainability value proposition win in the market.
Right.
And that's our main challenge, I would say. And ultimately, it's it is a question of money, but quite often, and I assume that you probably both agree that the more sustainable solution in the market is quite typically a more capex heavy, but then opex light alternative to that more traditional way of working. But I think the money is only one equation, one part of the equation. I think it also comes to, for instance, beliefs and values and so on.
So when you look at all the businesses that you're connected with, I mean, this is a kind of general question to you all. Are there things out there? Are there levers? Could it be policy? Could it be regulation? Could it be a lot of different things? Could it be more enthusiastic supply chains or whatever? Where would you point to is what you need to actually go further and faster and bigger and better and blah, 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 blah? Anybody can come in here, yeah.
I mean, I think there's a lot of things to be done in both the regulatory and the voluntary market, but starting with the regulatory, I think that we do need a price on carbon. We have one within the EU ETS, but I think we would need one in more geographies than only Europe. Looking at, for example, how the states are operating with IRA. I mean, they're investing a lot of money into green tech, but they're not punishing fossil at all, which we see that we need some kind of green premium for the steel because it is capex intense for us, and with a price on carbon within the EU, we get that. So that needs to be established in other markets as well.
Yeah.
And one of the voluntary mechanisms is, for example, SBTI. SBTI has...
That's the Science-Based Target Initiative.
Science-Based Targets Initiative, with a lot of companies signing up, committing, and looking at their Scope 3 emissions. And a lot of them, for example, the German car manufacturers seeing, okay, well, batteries is one, and then steel is the next frontier that they need to combat to lower their Scope 3 emissions, which makes them willing to pay more for green steel. Yeah.
Anybody else here? Just noting that we've got 2 minutes 49 seconds, so the clock is running very fast. Any other thoughts on this?
We've had to do a lot of lobbying in Pebble to make our kind of carbon dioxide sequestration agreed to as a mineralization.
Is this standards? They wanted to make sure the material was...
Okay, so that people who invest in a mineralization facility, that's a green investment. It has to be defined as that. And that just actually happened last week. We got the first step toward that. So we had to invest in lobbying from a very small startup from the beginning.
And this happened where? In Europe?
It's in Brussels,
In Brussels, okay.
I think I agree with both policy, but I think it's also very much about how we work together. It's a little bit of this, a little bit of a sustainability cliche almost, I would say, about collaboration and partnership and ecosystem, but it is all true. And I think that in the built environment, it is even more true than in some other industries, that you really need to find alignment and a joint goal for the full value chain to work together in order to actually start scaling with the speed that we need. And then secondly, we also need to be smarter about how we sell ourselves. So I think that we quite often make our own argumentation quite difficult to understand, with a lot of acronyms, a lot of Brussels acronym soup coming in the play. Just making it really simple why this is a better alternative for the future and also for the business.
With just 1 minute to go, any final thoughts? I mean, do you think the world we're living in right now is still ready for these developments? Do you think the green transition is still happening?
Yeah, okay, so for agroforestry, we have currently got letters of intent, people who want to buy for 15% of Europe's forest, and that's all inbound. Because everybody who owns forest would rather it be healthier and grew better. Yeah. And that is cheaper is good. So no, I think that people who, you can get something better and cheaper and green, then you really get fast buy-in and you get your alignments and incentives aligned.
And also there has to be, I think, as you say, some understanding that there needs a green premium. I mean, because actually, if you put in the full lifestyle analysis of some of the products we're still using and the damage they cause, that should be priced in to create a more level playing field. Yeah. Okay, good. Thank you very much indeed for being with us.
Thank you.
Thank you.